Welcome to the Morning Route Podcast. I am your host, Shane Johnson. We've got something for transportation pros, educators, parents, and everyone who appreciates the important role school buses play in our education system. So grab your favorite cup of coffee and let's hit the road. All right. Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Morning Route Podcast. A special guest with us here this morning, Lieutenant Brian Reu from the Minnesota State Patrol. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Shane.
Thanks for coming.
You bet.
Very much appreciated. If you would just very quickly introduce yourself, your title, your position with the Minnesota State Patrol for our guests here this morning.
All right, I'm Lieutenant Brian Reu with the Minnesota State Patrol, part of our commercial vehicle section. I'm officially signed as the state's director of pupil transportation.
And Lieutenant, how long have you been in this role?
I've been in this role for over 12 and a half years now.
Okay. Well, thank you for your service. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got a tough task, and I've talked to you a few times about that. So I don't envy you, but appreciate your service.
No problem. School bus industry can be a fun industry to work with, and yet sometimes challenging, but we work together.
There we go. Appreciate that. So I don't want to get too much into it, just out of privacy, but I know you got some kids. You're involved. Hockey, correct?
Yep. I'm a hockey dad. Got a 17-year-old son and then a 10-year-old girl that both play hockey.
Okay. That's pretty much a full-time job now, isn't it, hockey?
That is our season. It's not, we don't do the full year-round type thing, but still spend a lot of time at the rink, which we enjoy. It's fun.
Hockey, well, trying to get ice time is difficult from what I hear, so.
Yeah, we go to a few different rinks just to appease the need for traffic practices and things like that.
Yeah. Good luck with that. So how about hobbies? What do you like to do when you're not having to wear the uniform?
Lately, one of the things the last few years is my 17-year-old son and my wife are in a band, Leather Mustang, and they do a lot of performances, New Prague area, but then they're also branching out. They get to Wisconsin with the family over there.
Okay.
It's fun just going to watch them and hang out.
So what's the name?
Leather Mustang.
Leather Mustang.
Yep. It kind of started as my brother-in-law and Grayson kind of started it. And my brother-in-law considered himself the old man or the leather of the group, and Grayson was the young Mustang. So
very nice.
Kind of merged the two names together.
Shout out to the Leather Mustangs.
That's right. Got to try to promote the family.
So what's the genre of music with that?
A lot of the classic country. Grayson likes to do a lot of the newer stuff too, some Morgan Wallen covers and things like that. But typically that old school country vibe is
Waylon Jennings?
A little bit of Waylon.
Okay, there we go. All right.
Yep.
I'll have to check them out. So there you go. So what inspired you to want to be a state trooper? Was it you're 8 years old? We all have a dream, right? As a little boy, a little girl, like, hey, I want to grow up to be this. Like, when did you know, or what inspired you to want to be a trooper?
It wasn't necessarily lifelong ambition as a child, but we had family friends growing up that were police officers and things like that. Doing the career day at school, doing that assessment to kind of figure out what interests kind of fit with you, and it was one that kind of aligned. Growing up as a family, we like to get out and help serve the community. Christmases, we'd go to the mission and serve meals and things like that. Farm boy, southern Minnesota, knew I didn't necessarily want to just be doing the same thing day in and day out, sitting at a desk, which is kind of morphed into that role now. But for the bulk of the initial part of my career was out dealing with the public and trying to make the road safer.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I was just curious on that. Like, how do you get there? Like, was it a dream, aspiration, what that was? So I appreciate you answering that.
Yeah, I've had a couple contacts with the local guys growing up, kind of helped shape the desire a little bit. It's like,
there you go.
This car's kind of cool. Let's see if I can sit in the driver's seat at some point.
I'm a military guy. Spent a lot of time in the military. So for you guys on your side, could you help me or maybe our public understand what's the difference? You have obviously lieutenant, but then you have sergeants. Like, what is the what and the why of the separation? How do you separate? Like, and again, in the military, you have enlisted, then you have officers. So what's the difference here?
So we are paramilitary. We aren't like your traditional force, though, where our sergeants are actually like a ranking officer where they have supervisory responsibilities over somebody else. For the patrol, our sergeants are typically those specialty positions. So within our commercial vehicle section, all of our troopers are technical sergeants. So they receive additional training for the commercial vehicle inspection side of it. And then within the Office of Pupil Transportation, they have that commercial vehicle training as well as motor coach, school bus training, getting in and doing the driver file checks. So and then with the general patrol, we have the investigators that are technical sergeants and different specialty positions.
Okay. So say I look one, I guess I'll reference Sergeant Chad Doffenbach, who I know. Is there a transition that if he chose to become like a lieutenant, is there more schooling? Is there more classes? Like what, or you stay in that role and that's what it is?
So there's opportunities. It's kind of up to the individual and what they want to pursue. So for the promotional process, you have to have at least 5 years on it as experience. You take a written test that kind of assesses just your familiarization or understanding of just State Patrol general policies and procedures.
Okay.
There's also reasoning skills, observation tests, and just reading comprehension type tests. And then you get ranked. Okay. And then when a promotional opportunity comes up, you can submit your interest and then there'll be an interview.
Okay. All right. No, thanks for that. That helps me. I've always kind of wondered like the difference between the two, the transition from the one maybe possibly to the other. So thanks for walking me through that.
No problem.
How about, again, just for general public, you have obviously like a local police department, you have a county sheriff department, then you have the Minnesota State Patrol. Maybe just really quickly, like what is the separation between those three entities?
Right. So some of it's just that geographical or jurisdiction area. Obviously, State Patrol, we are a statewide authority. City officers are going to be primarily limited to work within that city. It's not to say they can't expand out to assist another agency sure. or somebody else within the county or whatever. And then the county is just that bigger county sheriffs. There's different roles that they do as well as far as like your civil service or things from the court. That all has to be done by the county officers just for court processing. State Patrol, we are generally specific to traffic safety. Okay. That is our primary initiative. We want to keep the roads safe, help people on the roads, respond to crashes, do what we need to do there. And just, again, that focus, our core mission is trying to make the roads safer for everybody. No,
appreciate that too. And then does one agency like have a priority? Maybe that's not the right word, but say again, there's a crash on Highway 169 here in Mankato. Does the locals take care of that, the sheriff, or because it's on Highway 169, when you guys arrive, do you, hey, this is our jurisdiction type thing?
Yeah, it's not really a power struggle by any means. I mean, we all work well together pretty much anywhere across the state. We're looking for help from them. They're looking for help from us. If it is a crash on our roads and they're first there, we typically do take it over. Okay. If it's something that they're already into, if they're there and we're half an hour later and they've already got the driver under arrest for an impaired driving, they can handle it. We're not offended by any means. We appreciate their help. But primarily, we will handle the calls on the state highways. Okay. We're more than willing to assist on a county road if they're not close. And we're there. We see something, we'll address it. We really work well together with the other agencies. There's certain things that if we come across, if it's a crime that happens that we deal with on the freeway that's not truly traffic safety, we will defer to whether it's St. Paul PD, if it's on 94 in St. Paul, say, hey, this isn't necessarily in our wheelhouse. Is this something you want to take over, or do you want us to handle it and we can just keep you involved in the process as we go forward? No,
thanks for clarifying that too. That helps. It's again just one of those things for me. I've always kind of wondered, like, how does the crossover work? What does that look like? So I'm sure if I was wondering it, others probably have as well. So
I'm sure.
Thanks for walking us through that. In the school bus division, what does that entail? How many people do you have in that division? Kind of what does it look like? What is your overall scope that you guys do here for the school buses here in Minnesota?
So the State Patrol has a primary responsibility for school bus safety as far as that state oversight perspective. And that we've been involved in the school bus inspection process since 1971 with our civilian inspectors doing the annual inspections. In 2008, as a result of a legislative audit, they've expanded that and developed the Office of Pupil Transportation, which solidified in statute the 15 civilian inspectors that do the bulk of the annual inspections. At that point, they designated 3 positions for our technical sergeants, as we talked about earlier, and then the state director of pupil transportation, myself. One of the school bus inspectors is the chief inspector, so kind of oversees all of the other 14 inspectors to make sure that we're striving for that consistency, accuracy in our reporting, the training of our inspectors to make sure that we're staying up to date on everything we need to be looking at and that we're applying the laws and regulations properly. The tech sergeant's jobs, they certainly assist there. We've expanded the 3. The statute talks about the minimum number of employees we have to have. We found a need to add a 4th. just to try to help serve that central Minnesota area.
Sure.
I mean, obviously it's a large state, and even our northern region, Kelly's got a lot of area. Sergeant Johnson, a big area to cover. Chad Doffenbach, Sergeant Doffenbach has a big area in southern Minnesota. Sergeant Kukowski has plenty of buses in the metro that he wasn't able to necessarily get out to St. Cloud or the Wilmer area. So we added that fourth body there, Sergeant Brisk. So he'll be has been a big benefit for that. They will do more of the driver file reviews to make sure that school bus drivers are being trained properly, that the training is being documented, that we aren't having issues with that. They'll look at some of the drug and alcohol testing requirements. Some of that was as a result of that audit. They found a need for more driver-involved inspections, or the legislature wanted to see more driver-involved inspections. It's great that we're checking the school buses themselves, but when you look at what incidents are happening or what's spurring the issues, it's a lot of times driver-related, whether it's drivers of cars or drivers of buses. It's not typically necessarily a mechanical issue that's causing the crash. It's usually driver error. And they wanted us to have more of an impact, more of a reach on that.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks for that as well. And I think looking back to the time frame of that 2008 is really when a lot of those things came into play, which I think were a direct result of, unfortunately, the school bus crash that we had in Cottonwood, Minnesota. It was actually, I think we'll be coming up on 17 years. It was February of 2008 that happened, where tragically, unfortunately, we lost four children that day. So I think, again, those things that you just walked us through are positives that came from a very negative, unfortunate accident that happened here. Like I said, about 17 years ago that we're coming up on. So
there's a couple different crashes in that time frame. And obviously, the Cottonwood one was a big one. I believe there was a crash in Forest Lake where Type 3, as we know it now, the passenger vehicles that are used to haul kids rear-ended a school bus, and a student died in that crash as well. So I think they started to see the effort was made to see what can we do more of, or what can we do better as the state to try to help reduce those.
And I think, and I look at it too, even us here internally in our company, when you have an incident or an accident happens, right, you want to try to peel that back and evaluate it, understand it, like what happened and the why, and then what changes can you make, right? Like, hey, we got to do everything we can to try to reduce this from happening again. So,
we want to do what we can to learn from those incidents to try to improve it and make it better. But we also got to make sure that we aren't doing that rushed reaction to it, and that we take the time to really analyze, think something through before we implement a change.
I agree with that. I appreciate you saying that as well. It's what we have to do. Take that step back first. Try to understand it the best we can before we make rash decisions that really don't have a positive impact on making positive change. So do you have, and I can go first on this, but I'll ask you a question. Do you have like a frustration of like, why is this still an issue? Like, why is this still an issue? And one I'll give, mine's probably a little bit more light, is backing. I'll get calls a lot from a site manager or operations manager go, well, we had another accident, so-and-so was backing. And I'm like, why? Like, why are we backing? Did we not have a spotter? Like, what happened here? And then on top of that, the one that frustrates me probably even more is pulling a trailer. I'll get a call from somebody at 8 o'clock at night, like, hey, the driver was at a high school, and the coach told them to turn around and back up, and now they're trying to back up with a trailer, and they end up jackknifing the trailer, and then we lose a trailer. So again, mine's probably a little bit more lighter, like, why does this keep happening, these backing things? But do you have anything like that, like maybe on a little bit larger scale? Like, why is this still an issue? Why are we still dealing with this after all these years?
Well, you're not the only ones that deal with those unfortunate backing incidents. I think if you ask our command staff at the State Patrol and they look at some of our squad-involved crashes, they're like, why are we having these minor crashes?
Well, that makes me feel a little bit better then.
And they're not typically when you're responding to something, extreme. It's just those everyday driving. You get nonchalant and overconfident in your ability and take that extra risk or chance that you don't necessarily need to why don't we just pull forward and turn around?
Right.
But, so we deal with that too. Right. Overall, in the grand scheme of things, it's that complacency comes into play even on the bigger scale, though. We've seen a lot of crashes recently, whether it's an intersection crash where somebody blows a stop sign or somebody runs right into the back of a dump truck at a stoplight. We see more cameras inside vehicles, whether it's passenger cars, but especially school buses that kind of show what's going on in the compartment. Certainly the distraction is a big piece with phones, but we're still seeing a lot of crashes where there isn't a phone or anything in the driver's hands. They're just clearly not zoned into what they need to do. I just reviewed a report from one of my guys yesterday on a vehicle that nicked or struck a pedestrian in a crosswalk, and watching the camera footage, they're just not checked in with what they're doing. They're zoned out and distracted by something. That cognitive distraction is just as big a deal as the phones. And it's a lot harder for enforcement side to necessarily catch that or detect that. When you're just driving next to somebody, it looks like they're looking ahead at what they're supposed to be doing, but you don't know what they're thinking.
And so, and with that, I'm going to guess that how do you fix that? Like because it's when somebody's not just literally just paying attention and they're zoned out, like you said, like trying to evaluate that, like how could we find a fix for that? I don't know if you can.
Like, I did not have that answer. If I did, I probably wouldn't be working for the state anymore.
That's what I'm saying. Like how do you tell people, hey, we need you to pay attention, and for them to actually do it? Like it doesn't seem like there's an easy fix to that.
There's not. I mean,
it's such common sense. Like you should be paying attention.
It is. And we try to do the messaging that we can, whether it's a press release, videos, posts, things here or there. Again, it's unfortunate, but everybody thinks that'll never happen to me. I'm a good driver. And we all kind of succumb to some of those fallacies.
Yeah. I was just driving the other day and I got an F-350, so I sit up a little bit higher and had this younger kid just coming past me. He's passing me there in the left lane, and I kind of just glanced over and looked, and I was doing about 68 and a 65, I'll admit it, so if we need to talk afterwards, we can. So he was going faster than me, but I just glanced over. He's just texting away on his phone. I'm like, again, just this not paying attention. It won't happen to me, that type of thing.
It's hard to rein that back in. Everybody's so that instant gratification, or just everybody feels that, oh, I can multitask, and you feel like you're just bored sitting there driving and I need to be doing something else. And then they take their focus off of what they really need to be doing, because there's a lot that you have to observe when you're driving. It's not automatic. Some people would like to see it be more automated driving.
Right. I don't know about that.
But there's still some challenges with that in place.
I'm not one of them. You won't find me in that camp. But again, I appreciate you guys on your end trying to tap into that and change people's attitudes and get them to pay attention and make the road safer. So appreciate the battle that you guys are up against on that. So just curious too, like in the school bus world, do you know of another law, or I don't know if law is the right word, but something that another state is doing that really makes sense to make school bus safer or more efficient or whatever that might be? Like, hey, that would be a good thing that we should maybe look at having here in Minnesota.
I know there's lots of things that other states do. I'm not familiar with every state's laws. I got to struggle enough to keep track of ours.
Sure.
In some perspectives, it makes sense, but yet there's also a lot of challenges that come with implementing it, or what would that fallout be? As we discussed, we don't want to make a rash decision. For instance, talking to California, anytime a student has to cross the road, they require a physical escort. So hopefully you're not going to have those kids struck by illegal passings, because you have an adult there making sure they're not just running out in front of somebody and they got their little stop paddle. It's going to either require an extra body on the bus, or they disable the bus and leave a busload of 50, 60 kids, and the driver gets off. And now what's the better situation there? And then obviously some states have implemented seatbelts. There's a lot of discussions on that, if that would make sense. There's a lot of push from the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, when they're doing analysis of what causes crashes, or why did we lose lives, what can we do to make vehicles safer. Just one of the perspectives they look at. So they make recommendations to states, and some states have gone to that point. Minnesota has not. It's another discussion point that we continue to have with the industry, and certainly understand the industry's perspective and the challenges that come with that one as well.
Yeah, I think talking about seatbelts, and that's kind of seems to always be a hot topic, especially when there's an accident, right? Again, kind of that rush to that. For me personally, I kind of step back and I look at it, because I think Minnesota does have, I believe there's a statute on the books that if a commercial motor vehicle, say a school bus, has a seat belt or a lap belt on it, if you're sitting in that seat, you have to wear it, correct?
Correct.
So I look at it more of, the enforcement side, because I talked to other contractors in other states that, yeah, they do have seatbelts, and I'll always ask them, well, how do you enforce it? And there's usually a chuckle of, there is no enforcement. Like, there's nothing you can do if a kid doesn't want to wear it or the parent doesn't want them to wear it. You don't do anything. You just have to get the kid to school. So I step back and go, to me, it's a lot of, is there a lot there if there's no teeth to it? So I look at it as like, okay, if this is what the law is and it has to be, then you're going to wear the seatbelt. And if you don't want to wear the seatbelt, you're not going to ride, because then it goes into the liability side. If there is an accident and the 3 students that get injured were not wearing their seatbelt, what's the ramifications of that? So again, a lot of discussion in it, hot topic typically. So again, enforcement, liability, what does all that look like?
Right. So, it's not something that we're looking at being heavy-handed in. It's like we're going to come in and jump on the bus quick and count how many aren't wearing their seatbelts and how many are, and start writing out tickets to the drivers or students if they're old enough to receive the ticket. But it's one of those safety items, piece of equipment that if it's there, it can certainly help. It will be another one of those culture changes for kids. And as they start at the younger age, they're used to being buckled to get on the bus. They're kind of confused. Wait a minute, where's my seatbelt? I'm in the car all the time. I have to buckle up. It feels odd. Then they quickly adjust while they're on the bus and enjoy it. And get a little more
rowdy. Do you see your 17-year-old wearing a seatbelt on the school bus?
He rides it for hockey games. So it's a culture change. And that's where I think needs to be that follow through on the district or company policies as well to kind of assist in that. And we aren't expecting a driver or an aide to be on the bus going up and down the aisle making sure everybody's buckled. It's not reasonable to have a seatbelt alarm on every seat, or I mean, it's possible, but probably not affordable to implement technology like that at this point.
I think NSTA, we did an evaluation, if you will. Some folks sat down and kind of did a study of what is the cost of equipping a bus with seatbelts, and somebody can fact check me on this, but I believe it was like between $13,000 to $15,000 to install seatbelts on buses. So it's a significant cost. Again, we are talking about safety, right? So dollars shouldn't matter. But when you talk to school districts and their budgets are strapped, and it's like, hey, we have to come back and we need, instead of a 8% increase, we need a 23% increase because we got to cover the cost of these seatbelts. So there's going to be a lot of resistance on that side too.
There is, and we understand that, we get it, and there's discussions on both sides of that as far as if the cost is that much higher, and I haven't checked the numbers recently, but I know it was as low as 7, but I've heard the higher numbers too, and that was a few years ago, so it's probably more.
Yeah, we'll go with my numbers.
Yeah, I won't argue with it. You've done more research on it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So if we're not able to rotate the buses out as quickly, now we have older vehicles on the road, they won't, obviously we do not recommend retrofitting a bus. Nobody recommends that. From the dealer side of it, or manufacturer side of it, that won't stand behind whether it was installed properly. So it would have to be through new buses coming out. So the cost more, you're getting less new ones on the road. Our district's going to have to reduce the size of their fleet, and maybe instead of transporting some of the kids that might have been within the non-transportation range, now they're going to force them to be either walkers or get rides by other means. And now is that as safe or less safe than being on a bus with no seatbelts, obviously? So a lot of factors in that discussion.
Yeah, it is. And it's fun to talk about because they're really, to me, there isn't two sides, because it is about safety, right? What's the right thing to do? But then you got to figure out all these sides and points to it to make it work for all the stakeholders, right? So, yeah,
I know the drivers of buses that have them, they've seen big increases in the student discipline, because, again, you're not necessarily going to know if the kids are wearing it, but you'll know if they're not when they're standing up screwing around, and you can kind of follow up and address it that. So they've seen less discipline issues on the buses, but again, that's just one factor to consider with all the other many factors.
It is. It'll be interesting too, because Bluebird is now coming out, and it's going to be a standard feature on their bus. So we're going to see it really quick here in Minnesota when folks are buying the new Bluebird bus. And what does that look like? Because there is a statute on the books that, hey, if this is there, you need to wear it. So I think we'll be probably seeing some results here soon of what that looks like.
It's interesting that that's the first manufacturer to take that approach to make it that standard option on their buses. and see what happens moving forward.
Yep. So appreciate the conversation. More to come.
Yes.
Right. So when you guys are doing school bus inspections, the annuals, or even the spot inspections, what are the more common fails, if I can use that word, that you guys see? Like, this is just something that we see over and over again. Maybe if you could share a few of those things with us today for, on our side, contractors, school district folks that are listening. Hey, here's things that are happening, but we can fix these. And try not to make that a more of a common issue all the time.
So there's a little bit of a difference between the annuals, and not much, but a little bit of difference between the annuals and the randoms, because annuals were coming. We're seeing things like garbage cans, or you're not seeing equipment stacked in the back door. But when you get to Excel, when you got the band coming or the hockey team coming for the state tournament, you'll see garbage cans stacked in the back door, bags, instruments. You guys have a lot of challenges on the things that you have to throw inside these buses when you're going to a sporting event. Pole vault equipment, skis, whatever else that don't necessarily fit nicely under a seat, and where do you put them? So we'll see more stuff in that aisle, in that back door, which is what it's considered an obstructed emergency exit, which those aisles and exits need to be clear at all times in that event of an emergency, that we can get out freely and easily. So that's more of an issue on the random side of it, at those destinations and events. On the annuals, I mean, we'll see a lot of the emergency exits. It's an electrical component, but those finicky buzzers, when you open up the exit windows or the exit doors, that buzzer needs to work. It needs to be audible in the vicinity of the exit. We'll do it a couple times to make sure that it's not just a sticky sensor or something like that, but if it's continuously or doesn't work or it's intermittent, it's going to be noted as a defect, and that would be something that puts it out of service.
Okay.
Exit markings we've talked about with your board might seem somewhat nitpicky from industry's perspective, but it's also something on the commercial side that the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance has deemed that it would be an out-of-service item for a motor coach going down the road. If somebody's sitting at an exit window and they don't understand how to operate it, they've deemed it as an out-of-service item. So we're kind of following that lead as well. We also adopt the recommended out-of-service criteria, the national standards and specifications and procedures, which is where we get our design standards as well for Minnesota. So that's a group that every state sends a delegation to that kind of votes on what these should or should not be and has a say, and then it gets published. So it's kind of a industry recognized best practice, if nothing else, but then states take pieces out of that as they will. So that's where we get a lot of our guidance on what should fail, what shouldn't fail. It's not just Lieutenant Reu decided this was a bad idea or a good idea.
That's the rumor on the street, Lieutenant Reu. Yeah,
right.
Said.
Because he said so.
Yeah. And I appreciate you giving a little bit of insight there, because I think we would agree on this. And I'm going to get this wrong here a little bit, but correct me, please. I think the study shows, or the stats show, about 20% of school buses in Minnesota failed inspection last year. Am I close?
I think it was about 23% last year. We are down to 18% this year. So we are going in the right direction.
Which is good. Right. Awesome. And I think that the important piece in there, and you kind of tapped on this a little bit, is that a lot of the fails are not critical safety features. It's not like it's a tie rod or it's a drive link or ball tires, right? The buses are driving on the road. There might be a sticker on a window that says emergency window, and maybe it's half peeled off. And that really does constitute a fail, and the bus will fail. Or say a buzzer just was intermittent and not working the best that morning, the bus fails. So again, if we were to maybe parse those out, maybe non-critical, and just go to a critical, I guess that number would even be cut in half. 18% might be 9%. Would that be fair? Like, I think just for a general awareness, so people are reassured, whether it's mom or dad, superintendent, school boards, that it's not like that number is a critical safety. Maybe we're going to disagree on this, because to me, there is a difference between a sticker and a tie rod.
Criticals, maybe not to appreciate it. To appease those concerned citizens and parents, obviously, the buses are fixed before they go back out on route. So it's not like a bus is going down the road that has been placed out of service. Ideally, it has happened, but obviously that's not the majority. Right. It gets fixed. There are, I don't know if I'd use the term critical, not critical, just because obviously the National Congress has deemed that if it's failed, that technically it should be considered somewhat of a critical or important issue that could be fixed. If we somehow identify which ones were readily repaired or fixed on scene type of thing versus took a little bit more effort to fix, I don't disagree that a sticker not being there may not be quite as important as your brakes, because if you need to get out of a bus in an emergency situation, I think you'll hopefully find a way to figure it out. But, and obviously in that high stress situation, you're probably not reading the directions, but the idea is that while you're sitting there beforehand, if you're bored and don't have your phone with you, oh, what's the sticker say? Rather than peel it off the window, you actually read it.
No, and I appreciate you bringing that up too, because that's really important that I think the public understands. 9 times out of 10, that bus is fixed on the spot, probably within a couple minutes. Like that deficiency was corrected on the spot. So the buses are not leaving. They're not transporting kids.
Yeah, whether it's a lot of them can be on the spot. A lot of them are within the day, or that if we're at a carrier for a couple of days, it might be the next day that they run it back through to have us recheck it and put the sticker on it.
Yeah, no, appreciate you clarifying that too. That's very important. So upcoming legislation, do you see anything on the horizon that maybe is going to impact us here in Minnesota in the school bus world?
There's nothing that I'm aware of currently. The State Patrol doesn't have any legislative initiative specific to the school bus industry. Okay. Talked with Eric Simonson, the lobbyist of MSBOA, had lunch with him the other day to just kind of get a feel for the vibe and what each organization or entities kind of looking at doing. You know, for the most part, as we've learned over the years, it's very difficult to get anything passed legislatively if it's not mutually agreed upon, or if the state's pushing it and industry's pushing against it. It really, most effectively, and the way it typically needs to be, is that joint effort, and we're in agreement on something to truly make that legislation possible and work for both.
Okay. Yeah, no, appreciate that too. Yeah, I know we got a couple things brewing, I guess you'd say, on the MSBOA level, but nothing over the top. So yeah, we'll see what happens here. St. Paul could be interesting this year with the way things are set up. So we'll see. We'll stay out of the politics for today. So yeah, thanks. Stop arm violations. Obviously, this is a huge thing. I just want to quickly say a big thank you to everybody that was involved in St. Paul the past few years with the grants. Getting those cameras on school buses was huge. And so I just want to say a big thank you, myself personally, Palmer Bus Service, MSBOA. I'm sure you guys too, Minnesota State Patrol, very grateful for that coming out of St. Paul.
Yeah, that was a big push of retired Senator Newman's initiative, and he made it happen, and it was definitely, from our perspective, a worthwhile tool. It did expand last year with an extra, was it $1.5 million, which I think it's closed right now, the last phase, but we will be reviewing those requests here within the next week or two to kind of make determination on who gets what. I know that the first few rounds, I think everybody pretty much got what they wanted within the limit of the ability, but I think talking to OTS, there was a request for roughly $4.5 million worth of cameras on this round, and there wasn't that much money in this grant, so we're going to have to make some determinations on who gets what, and divvy it up appropriately to make sure that people that weren't able to make it work the first few rounds have the opportunity, and that it's being used reasonably and obviously across the state as much as we can. Yeah,
this last round, I'm sure some people will be happy and others will be disappointed. So we'll, good luck with you guys in the decision-making process. So, no, again, it was so needed, long overdue. I'm excited to see in the next year to two, maybe the return on investment, like seeing the numbers come down, maybe citations have increased, but then we see the illegal passings decreasing, right? That's the goal of this. So I'm excited to see the numbers here as they
I appreciate you bringing up that's your intent on the return of investment. When I first heard it, I'm like, okay, we're going to go with, we want to make sure we're getting the money back out of it to pay for the cameras. That's never been the intent of the program. This wasn't another one of those. It wasn't a revenue generating opportunity. It was truly that safety oriented focus. So that return of investment that we want to see, as you mentioned, is that reduction in number of illegal passings. I think we've seen an increase in those reported, obviously, because now it's captured and drivers feel they have more of an opportunity to follow up on it. It might have been one in the past, you didn't get a plate or good enough a description, but the camera can help that now. So law enforcement has certainly seen a need in the number of reports, which is something that we may need to go back to the table and look, is there a way that we can kind of help law enforcement moving forward with body is our ability to follow up with these number of violations.
Yeah. And again, just to me too, it's not about generating revenue. It is, at the end of the day, it's about keeping kids safe, and you can't put a price on that, right? Like this isn't about dollars. So yeah, I think I could probably, I'll speak for us, but I could probably speak for many. Probably a little bit of frustration is not knowing the follow-up. I know here at Palmer Bus Service, I did kind of poll all of our managers, and probably at least 90% of them, when they do report the stop arm violation, we never hear back like, hey, a citation was given or it wasn't or whatever. It kind of just goes into the abyss, if you will.
Right.
So I don't know, again, just looking down the road, if there's a way to get information back. I'm not asking for today because I know there's a lot to it, but maybe at some point, like, hey, there is some follow-up, there is some numbers given back so people can see again, this is working. Like my time to do this, to report it, it is working, versus like, I don't know what's going on. I never hear anything.
Yeah, no, I get that. We certainly don't want drivers to feel like, well, I don't know if anything's going on or not, so they stop reporting it. And we've talked about it at driver presentations for years. There are several probably broken links in the chain of the system of getting it from start to finish to following up with those stop arm violations. But obviously, if it doesn't get reported, that first link's broken, then nothing else is going to follow up on the back end. So I've always said, don't be the broken link. I don't want law enforcement to be the broken link. I don't want the courts to be the broken link, but obviously don't let it start with you.
Right.
There are some efforts that I know Sergeant Krakowski's working on with the U of M and MnDOT and Office of Traffic Safety to try to find a better statewide system for reporting those violations, and then getting them routed to the appropriate agency. And then it would also have that kickback effect or follow-up where you can kind of see what happened with it. Right. I know as an early road troop, I always want to know what happened with my tickets too. So you read through the court dispositions, and then sometimes you were more frustrated than not, and it was better off just not knowing what the courts did with it. Right. I did my part and made sure it got to where it needed to go, and hopefully the person learned from it. And even that, if the courts do take the discretion, as they certainly can, and there's times it's definitely warranted and needed, to give somebody a deal where they pleaded something else. Drivers, they want to say, I want to see the conviction on the record. There's still, it's not that it's punitive, but there's still lost time, or it's a mandatory court appearance. Mm-hmm. So they're already typically losing time off of work. If they are paying court fees or something else, just because they don't have that conviction on the record, or you don't see a conviction come out of it, doesn't mean that the message wasn't sent or the message wasn't received, because there's still a lot of impact on those drivers that have to go and answer to somebody for it. And that's one of the reasons that we haven't gone away from making it why we haven't made it a payable offense. There is a little bit more of a responsibility put on them to go and explain to somebody why they did or didn't do what they did.
Yeah, no, appreciate the pieces to that, because there's always more to it, right? And oftentimes, even myself, I don't understand always the backside of it and what that looks like. So appreciate you adding those pieces to it. So very helpful.
I certainly get the perspective the drivers wanted to know that what they did was worthwhile. What they're doing by reporting it is worthwhile. It's moving that along in the process, and they're doing it for their students, not necessarily just for the fact of getting that check box that a ticket was written or wasn't.
Right. I shouldn't assume, but I'll assume you did see the report that NISTA finally put out. I think it was delayed a little while, but the reducing the illegal passing of school buses. So did you get a chance to leaf through that?
I have not read through that one yet.
Okay. I won't spoil it for you, but there was one like a very alarming piece in there. So I will share this with you, but they did a survey of 3,500 people on why they don't stop, or why they didn't stop for a school bus. And number one was that they don't care, 30.5%. They didn't care. I mean, that's alarming. Number two was I'm in a hurry at 25.5%. The third reason was they didn't know the law at 24.3%. And then number four, and we talked about this earlier, was just being distracted at 12.2%. So if you need a copy, I'll make a copy for you, Lieutenant, before you leave. But you probably have it. But again, just very alarming that the 30.5%, I didn't care. It's like, I don't know how you fix that, right? We talked about that earlier too. Like, how do you fix almost like common sense? Like,
it's again, just that's that mentality of I'm going to take care of myself. I come first, I guess. Unfortunately, no different than what with people that are just going to blatantly, exceed the speed limit or not make any efforts to not drive drunk or I'm better than anybody else and I have the right to use my phone as I drive. So it's that is an alarming number. I mean, I've often felt that the biggest reason people go by the stop arm is they are distracted and didn't see the bus.
I don't know how you see a 40-foot yellow school bus, but
like I said, when people are not seeing red lights in front of them or stop signs and blowing those too, it's like, where are our minds as we're driving?
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I said, if you get a chance, read through it. It's very interesting read, very easy to read too. I think they did a really good job on just getting to the meat versus a lot of times you read through reports, it's like, I don't even know what this means. So they did a really good job, my opinion, on that. Can you, and we'll wind down here. I know you're busy and thank you for your time, but can you share with us what are a couple things that to tell drivers don't do? And maybe I'll lead into it, is trying to almost trap another car in going through, the red lights, the stop arm, like come to a complete stop. Make sure that other vehicle maybe sees you, making that eye contact. But I think we probably have had people guilty of almost wanting to try to get somebody to go through that. So any insight that you could give there?
That's a timely discussion. I just had an email this morning from one of my troops that asked me to review a video of a stop arm violation and make that determination. Shouldn't we? Is not a violation based on where the stop arm was by the time the car came through. And that was one of my responses to them, is like it almost appears that it's a case of the driver not necessarily being, the school bus driver not necessarily being aware of where other traffic is at the time, how fast they're going, the fact that they're not slowing and just throwing it out there because I can. And the law does say that when you stop, you're supposed to activate the reds and deploy the stop arm. So if there's ways that I drove school bus, there's only a couple of years, but you get that sense relatively soon if you're paying attention to what other cars are doing, if they're reacting to your yellows or not. And if they're speeding up or maintaining their speed, can we slow down a little bit more gradually to allow them that time to pass, so by the time we do stop, they're not in that really close call zone of by the time the stop arm is deployed, they're right there and have no opportunity. The ambers are on, they should be slowing. Yeah. But if you've driven school bus long enough, you get the sense or feeling of whether they're going to or not, and why risk that and deploy the reds just because, I'm going to get a stop arm violation, because you don't want the kids to use the reds as that trigger to start crossing and then get struck by somebody. I agree. Back to that just everyday driving piece, being aware of your surroundings and what's going on with your vehicle, but also other ones and the pedestrians around you as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think we definitely agree that we probably have seen some videos where I think you were just trying to get somebody. And at the end of the day, it's not worth it, right? Because like you said, that's the trigger for students, that when they see that red light and that stop arm, they're gonna run across the roads.
A lot of them do. We want them to wait. We encourage them to wait. We tell them to wait. And this is part of that discrepancy that you'll see when you're starting to wonder, the number of reports that we see for stop arm violations versus the number of tickets that are written are just somewhat drastically different. Right. Part of that is that discretion piece that we have to take into play. It's like the stop arms coming out as vehicles right here. Am I comfortable going to testify or feel that I have a solid case on that or not, or if there's something that could have been done differently? So that's where a lot of those discrepancies come into play, whether it was written or not, or why the courts just said, no, this was too close, we're not going to prosecute it or charge it. So, I think for me, it just comes down to, again, common sense, do the right thing and make sure that the kids are coming first, not that second piece. So one more question for you. And if I remember right, this one did come from Bethany, is what can we do in partnership with you, State Patrol, to enhance student safety? Is there anything maybe jumps out like, hey, I'd really love to work with you guys, MSBOA, to, again, enhance student safety? Well, I think one of the biggest things, especially based on your comments on the NSTA study, is...
this was NHSTA.
NHTSA study. Okay. Was the awareness piece, the education piece. Of 31% or whatever it was that you said was for not knowing the law. I mean, we think we had, was it 10,000?
24% for not knowing the law. 24%.
All right.
That's okay.
That's still a pretty significant number.
Yeah, no, it's a big number, yeah.
What can we do better? I mean, we had a $10,000 allocation or allotment from the legislature last year. I think it was 10,000 to produce some more educational content, and we worked with a firm to do that. And that was something that DPS did with our own research and efforts, but certainly things that we can do together from industry's perspective on that. Say, hey, whether it's, yes, it's the state getting the money, but we can certainly take that industry input initiatives and also sharing that information out there for you guys to get it out on your different social media platforms and whatever else. Continue to create, and thinking outside the box, how do we get that message out there? TV ads aren't necessarily as effective. Radio ads aren't necessarily as effective. That doesn't mean we don't do them.
Right.
But is there a better way for us to get that? How do we enhance the content in the driver's education course? If you got kids that go through the class, there's a lot of topics they got to cover.
Right.
You hear a lot of it as these younger drivers that aren't familiar with the law or don't know the law. Well, they're supposed to be getting that in that driver's ed program. Right. But it's a classroom setting. You're getting a lot thrown at you. So what can we do to improve that continuing education? And then if we see more drivers getting the license beyond 18 years of age, so they're not required to go through the driver's ed program. Right. They're just going through the manual themselves and taking the test. And yeah, there's a question on the Class D test on that, but if it's the one you don't know and you get wrong, you still get your license.
Right.
Oh, well.
Right.
No.
Oh, well, right. Yeah. No, I think, yeah, that's maybe the next time we sit down, and I know you are very actively involved with our state organization, so thank you for that. We could continue having this conversation of, ways that we can partner together to, enhance student safety out there and road safety and all those things. And again, I think we all look at it the same as a partnership. We're in this together, and sometimes we might have a little bit of a disagreement here and there, but at the end of the day, it's about safety.
It is.
Yeah. So appreciate that. So is there anything that we didn't cover today? You're going to be coming back here in a couple months, so we'll have lots more to talk about. But, I want to go back to one thing that you said about we were talking about, I think you said Mike was maybe putting together, he was doing a study and maybe on the back end, getting that information back to stakeholders. If there's anything that we can do, MSBOA, as well to help facilitate that or be a part of that, please let us know. And again, just if he has a question like, hey, what about this? How does this look like on your guys' end to help piece all that together? I think we'd love to be a part of that if needed. Yeah,
we're certainly willing to do that. I know he's working with the local road research board. And I think that, I don't remember exactly where they're at in the process. I know they had to request some more funding. They were initially looking at doing it in like a half of implementation and then come back and do another half, but the U of M, when they were helping, decided it doesn't make sense to split it in two pieces. We need to do it all as one, so they needed to request more funding. Okay. But I know they were looking at the pilot project or starting to get some of the pieces out there on some of the buses just to start testing. So I know Mike was working with some contractors and districts on that, so certainly we value your input on that. It's one lot to close out. Obviously, it's winter season. Again, comes back into that being aware of your surroundings and things like that. But just remember your winter driving skills. Give yourself more time. It takes longer to stop. It takes longer to necessarily pull out and merge back into a roadway with somebody. And just really hit that piece about that remaining aware of your surroundings and situation. So, no, appreciate that. I think one thing I taught my kids just driving, but even here in the school bus world, it's the same as, especially in winter driving. It's the same all the time, but even more so. Winter driving, roads are a little bit slicker, is give yourself plenty of room between you and the car in front of you, because if someone does rear end you, maybe you won't rear end the person in front of you, but again, if that car even stalls in front of you, you have room to get out and around, all those things, so spacing. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's funny, KQ was talking about that the other morning about, they always felt, one of them was saying how they always thought, you gotta get as close as you can, and there was a study that came out, like, unless you're more than 25 feet back, the timing for you clear the intersection with just as many cars as you would without it. Give yourself that room, like I said. So if you get rear-ended, you're most likely not, or hopefully not going to get pushed into them, or you have that room to react. And just try to reduce risk, right? Right, absolutely. So with that, hey, thanks for the time today. So the last thing is this, here on the Morning Route podcast, I like to ask people, if you had a chance to share a cup of coffee with somebody, could be anybody, could be from 100 years ago till today, who's a person you'd just love to sit down, have a conversation with, bend their ear, or maybe it's somebody inspired you. I don't know. But if you had that opportunity. Ooh,
Good question. Probably the best
That
question,
is a good
right?
question. I don't know. I'm going to throw Jenna under the bus here and said, I have a cup of coffee with Jenna, but she's never around when I come down here. So,
Well, she's going to hear this, so
Yeah, I
I
know.
guarantee you she's going to take you up on it. So good
Sounds
luck
good.
with that. So
Hey, I appreciate it. We appreciate you giving us the opportunity to come down and talk about school bus safety and just the things that are going on with the industry and driving in general. And hopefully people are taking it to heart and help us out and come up with things we can work together on moving forward.
yeah, I appreciate it too, Lieutenant. You guys have an awesome job. And I mean that in a way of just a lot of gravity that you guys have out there, keeping the roads safe, keeping the public safe. So thank you for all that you guys do. Really do mean that. And going into the holiday season here, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you as well, and be safe.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Shane.
Okay.
You as well.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Stay up to date with the podcast by following us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe to the Morning Route Podcast YouTube channel.